Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Miranda and I am the Enchantress of Avalon. So for today's video, I decided I would do another video discussing one of my favorite goddesses, Persephone. It's very appropriate given that she is both a goddess of springtime and flowers and a queen of the dead. So she's perfect to discuss this time of year. I'm going to obviously be focusing on her death aspect in this video, given it is that happiest month of the year, October. I do want to point out, it's hard to see. I'm going to adjust my camera here. Up there behind me is my print of Dante Gabriel Rossetti's Proserpina, which is, of course, the Roman equivalent of Persephone. So I have that in my living room. It's also why I wanted to do this video in here because I wanted that behind me. You can't really see it though, but at least you saw it for a moment. So Persephone is that amazing goddess who's this combination of these two very drastic dualities in the Greco-Roman pantheon. We have duality goddesses in other religions, obviously, and in the Celtic, in Welsh Celtic, we have Blodeuwedd, who is again a very dual aspected goddess, flowers and owls, in those two aspects. And I think my love of Persephone is kind of similar to a lot of things about me, and I'm also a huge fan. My other favorite Greek goddess is Aphrodite. So I love anything beautiful and I love anything romantic and sexual. I love that. But I also love the creepy, the macabre, the morbid, the death stuff. So Persephone is my other favorite goddess of the Greek pantheon because of this. She embodies both sides. She is by nature a springtime goddess, a fertility deity. Like Aphrodite, she's also a fertility goddess. And in fact, one of her major symbols, which we see, it's on the Rossetti painting behind me, and it's in most interpretations of her, is her sacred fruit, the pomegranate. The pomegranate is in and of itself a symbol of fertility. It is a fruit that symbolizes fertility and especially female fertility, along with apples. Apples would be the other one that symbolize fertility. And we see that for someone like Aphrodite, she has both apples and pomegranates as sacred to her. But Persephone has pomegranates, and they are intrinsic in that most famous myth about Persephone. And that is, of course, her abduction by Hades. It's classically referred to as the rape of Persephone. I don't like that term because the classical meaning of that word is not the same as the meaning of it today, obviously. The classical meaning of that word is simply to steal away, to abduct, to kidnap. So I usually use abduction or kidnapping as opposed to that particular phrasing. And also, it takes away a lot of her autonomy when we talk about her being abducted. There are versions of her myth where she was completely complicit and even wanted to go with Hades. Sometimes she even planned it with him in certain ones. And I love those versions because it's giving her back some of her autonomy, first of all, and it's also showing an important part of her psychological makeup, and that is forced to be the mother's daughter forever. You know, her mother was Demeter, who was the goddess of mothers. She was the most maternal of all of the Greek goddess figures. And she had only one child, a daughter who she held on to for dear life. But Persephone was a young goddess who was growing up. She wanted to be able to experience things and to have her own life. Psychologically, you can't be stunted into being a child forever. We talked about how being stunted into childhood forever is a negative thing in my Claudia video when we were talking about child vampires. This is a kind of similar concept. She wasn't muted into being a little girl. She wasn't a little girl's body, thank goodness for Persephone, but she was in this forced role of being the perfect daughter that she could never live up to. So I think it makes a lot of sense that Persephone would go ahead and pull away and say, no, I'm not going to be a child forever. And if she was approached by Hades and he wants to marry her and he's not a figure that you think of. A lot of people think of Hades as being very much this death personified figure, and he is a personification of death in that he's a king of the dead and he controls the underworld. He sends Thanatos, who's the actual personification of death. Thanatos is god of death in that he is literally the personification of death. He literally goes and takes people when it's time, kind of like the more modern interpretation of the Grim Reaper. But it's Hades that tells Thanatos what to do. So he is obviously a personification of death, but Hades is not really described in terms of being unattractive. In fact, besides being the god of the underworld and ruler of the underworld, he ruled wealth. Yeah. If you wanted to get wealthy, you prayed to Hades. So that's attractive. Any young woman knows that a man who either is wealthy or has the ability to become wealthy can therefore take care of your any children you might have better, take care of you better, and you would have a lot of freedom with your life in a way that, especially in the times of ancient Greece, you would not have had without that man in your life. So he was not an unattractive figure. It's often assumed he was. He wasn't. And if he approached her wanting her as his bride and to make her a queen, of course she would have wanted to do that. Who wouldn't? And she gets to escape her overbearing mother at the same time. So, yeah, Persephone does go off with Hades. Whether it is against her will or by her own will, I like to look at it as by her own will. And that I also look at it, I think that eating the pomegranate seeds in Hades, in the underworld that is, that Hades gifted her, it was the food of the dead. She was forever bound to the underworld. She knew it, and she did it on purpose. Plenty of tellings tell us, oh, she was tricked. But she may have been a younger goddess, and she may have been sheltered to high heaven by her fucking mother, Demeter, but Persephone was not stupid. I'm sure she would have heard tell that if you ate the food of the dead, you become part of the underworld. Yet she still ate those pomegranate seeds. And also, he gifted her food that was symbolic of fertility and sexuality. This can be seen as a sexual act in and of itself. He was binding her to him sexually as well as binding her to the underworld. I like to think that she chose to eat them, and that when she went up to her mother and was happy to see her, sure, she still loved her mother. She probably was happy to see her, but she was probably a little elated that she got to be free for half of the year. When Persephone leaves, that's when we have fall and winter in the world, according to the ancient Greek myth, because Demeter is no longer tending things, and Persephone is the goddess of spring, so when she comes back, that's when spring starts. So it works. But she also has dominion over the dead. She has just as much power to say who goes to what area of the underworld as Hades does. They are in a very, very healthy marriage. And there really isn't cheating in their marriage, I want to note. There are myths of, the nymph Minth being into Hades, but Persephone gets super pissed off and gets revenge on her. There is the myth of Zagreus that one version of the myth is that Zeus was the father. Yeah, so Zeus slept with his own daughter and begat a son. But this was supposed to have taken place before her marriage to Hades, so that still isn't cheating. they were really there for each other. They had an actual union, and they are thought to be the earliest version of one of my favorite artistic and literary motifs of all time, Death and the Maiden. She literally was the maiden. Her name before becoming goddess of the underworld was Kore, Kore. It literally means maiden in Greek. That's what she was called. When she became Hades' bride, she got the name Persephone, often said to be the dread Persephone. And she became this goddess of death as well as of life. She ruled over the two dual aspects. In many ways, you could say she ruled over everything, because she ruled over the burgeoning and the fertility of spring, and then she also ruled over the dead and the dying and comforting them. She was very much that maternal figure to the dead. She was comforting to them. So she evolved from the daughter to the mother figure when she became queen of the underworld. And she makes appearances in a lot of famous myths as well as her own story. She is the one who gives this box, it's supposed to be a beauty potion of some sort, to Psyche in the tale of Eros and Psyche, because that's one of Psyche's missions from Aphrodite, is to go to Persephone and get this beauty potion of some sort. She's the one who gives it to her. And there is also her appearance in the tale. This is a later one. It's an important one, though. Her appearance in the Orpheus and Eurydice tale. She appears right alongside Hades when Orpheus is asking to get his wife back, and Hades is uncertain, and Persephone is moved by the fact that this man would come to the underworld and brave all this as a human in order to get his wife back. So it is Persephone's encouragement that gets Hades to say, okay, yes, you can have her back, but you have to trust me. Don't turn around. Of course, that has a very sad ending, but we see Persephone influencing this cause and effect. She influences Hades to say, no, don't let him go. Let him have a chance, at least, to win his wife back. So she really is that perfect combination of death and sex, beauty and death, and the beauty of death. Like, death can be a release from suffering, and I think that's what Persephone really embodies as the goddess of the underworld and as the queen of the dead. So I hope that you've liked this video. Have a absolutely fabulous Morbid and Macabre Monday, and I will see you on Friday. Bye now.